So, you think Tiana wants to come, or?
She's gonna run the hotel. We're kind of open now.
Oh, okay.
We're ready to build yet. We have to have design before we can build.
Yep. Oh, she's ready to build. All right. Well, we're going to talk about how to make the design. Okay. There's going to be some fun art involved. I have some colored pencils, and you can color on the map and show us where you want the different plans to go. Okay.
Well, I know a good plan. It's good.
Let me guess. Is it concrete?
It's kind of a rose.
Oh, rose. Roses are useful. Yeah, has it ever goes through it? Does it have a giant red fruit at the end? Looks like a tomato. Yeah.
Like at the library.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah, you could take those. They're really easy to propagate. You just stick them in the fridge for like a few months, and they start spreading.
I had one basket of block, and then we got one more basket and sorted the blocks into different baskets.
Neato.
Hey, honey.
All right, you ready to learn?
We're ready to learn. So
Okay.
you want to sit here with me, or
you can sit here.
Your head looks giant on the screen.
Yeah!
Giant head. Okay. Resources for mapping. So my favorite thing to do is get the county map for a given, especially if I'm designing a property, because it has the most accurate lot line and it has bearings. It depends. Well, I've got some county maps here that I base my other maps on, but generally they're accurate, and they have bearings to the other corners. So you can take bearings as well. It's a good place to start.
So that's if you have fairly big property, right?
Well, if you're wanting to do an entire property, so for the co-op garden, for example, we just had a space that was 50 by 100, and we knew where the space was, and it was easy peasy lemon squeezy, 50 by 100. We just measured it out. So I just, drew that on my graph paper. But this is if you've got, something like this that's got nooks and crannies, and the lines go this way and that way, and at weird angles, and the one design I showed you that had half of it was food forest, and it was kind of a weird shape. That's where the county map really comes in handy. Even the one that shaped like a fetus, the county map really came in handy there too, because it also shows the easements as well. And sometimes it has measurements from the easement to the lot line, and so you can check how accurate it should be spot on. Those maps should be.
Okay, so one of the ladies here has offered us 5 acres for a community garden. This would be perfect, wouldn't it?
It would be good, yeah.
Or is that too much?
Well, is the property bigger?
I haven't seen it yet.
It would be a good resource to have.
Whose property is it?
Lee.
Okay, that's who we were talking to the radio.
Oh, Lee.
Lee.
Yeah.
Have you been out there?
Well, we just did an interview with her the other night.
On the radio. And she talked about her property, and she wants us to do a workshop there as well. She was talking to us about doing maybe a design for helping her with design.
I think it would be helpful to have a map of the entire property, because she's interested in doing permaculture and natural building all around. So it'd be good to get an idea of how everything is going to work together, and the flow into the garden, and the access to the garden, where the cars are going to park. And then what I do when I get the county map, I take it to the print shop and I have it blown up to something that fits my paper. I usually I like to work with 11 by, I think it's 11 by 24. And so I like to get something that'll fit onto this.
Okay.
And then I can talk about, I'll talk about it now. What I do is I tape, actually on a big window or a sliding glass door, I'll tape it up, and then I'll tape my graph paper over it and trace the lines. And that's how I do the transfer. Because I don't like to design online on the computer. I tried SketchUp and Inkspace, and it's just not my thing. I'm an artist. I like to color and draw. So I'm not inspired by doing designs on the computer. I'm inspired by doing designs by hand. And so that's how I transfer. If you have like a transparency that you can project it, but you want to make sure there's a scale on it, and if you blow it up, you want to know how much you're blowing it up so you can keep track of the scale. But anyway, that's my favorite way to do it.
Well, Lee's in real estate, so she should be able to get the
Oh yeah, no problem.
map.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is she gonna have you guys do the layout for it? Because I
Well,
was,
we're gonna talk to her about it.
Yeah.
You've already.
because I wanted to be involved. I told her I want to be
Well,
involved in that.
You need to be. I mean,
Sure.
everybody who has a stakeholder, we call them, anybody who has
With
some
a stake
interest
in it, yeah.
should be part of the group that discusses it.
Yeah. So also, you can have, for contour, you can have surveyors come out and contour the property. You can also do the contours yourself using some simple tools. For example, this is an A-frame level that my son and I made out of scrap wood. This can be used to measure, but right now we just have it set up to find level. So it looks like the floor in here is not level. Level.
You got a rat.
Let's see. But I think it looks like it's still a little bit off.
Probably not quite.
Yeah. So if it, well, maybe it's closer.
Closer,
Okay.
close.
Yeah, it's closer. But you can, for example, put an inch block under one side, and then you get an idea of where an inch is on here, and you can make marks on your, here I've got the center line, but you can make other marks. A really good way to do it is to use a bubble level. Have you ever used a bubble level before?
Yeah, I've got one. I've got a, yeah.
Well, I mean, what I'm talking about is a long piece of tubing with water in it.
Oh, yes, okay.
Water level.
Yeah, water level. Oh, sorry, yeah, water level. Well, yeah, it has a kind of, and it'll, because water finds its level, and you put a ruler on both sides, and so you can see, depending on how long. We did that once when we were building a straw bale cottage. We leveled the posts, to figure out how level it was. We used the water level.
Well, I've got a hand level with the infrared, with the
Oh, you
LED light.
laser level.
laser level,
Oh,
yeah.
well,
Transit. Like a little transit.
I could use that. too.
That would be
It's
helpful
got quite a
too.
range on it too.
Yeah,
so.
that would be helpful. I don't have one of those, so, but if you do, that's great. Another, an app, a program called Gaia GPS, downloads, lots of map layers, has topos down to really small scale, accurate GPS waypoints and elevation, contour lines. You can do tax lines. You can do all kinds of layers on this program. I happen to have a free subscription to this for a year because I volunteered with Adventure Scientists. We were taking maple samples all over the state. So, and then Google Earth is a good place to start. You can just like I went onto Google Earth last night and punched in Pacific Sunset Inn and took me right to it, showed me the property. You used to be able to get tax lines on Google Earth Pro, which is now free, but I suspect that there was some kind of liability implication because the lines weren't that accurate. So you can subscribe to a different service to have the lot lines, tax lines superimposed on a Google Earth Pro map. And then there's something called Map Info Professional, which is what Darren Dartery uses. Darren Dartery, isn't that his name? Dartery? Yeah, Dartery. Anyway, that there's a professional and a non-professional version. That looks like a very intricate program. He does large scale permaculture designs and keyline stuff, so that's a little bit beyond my scope. And then Google SketchUp is a free CAD design program that a lot of people really like. I didn't care for it too much. The learning curve was very steep, and like I said, I just don't really like to do designs on the computer. And then there's also the USGS map locator tool, and it doesn't have a fine scale for contour lines, unfortunately, but the maps are pretty good. So those are some resources that you can use. When I'm mapping, when I'm out in the field, I always have with me 100-foot measuring tape. I have grid paper, pencil. Usually I take a compass with me with a sight on it, not just my phone. The A-frame level for a second contour, which can be used to measure. I said bubble level, but maybe I meant water level. I always call it a bubble level for accurately measuring contour if you're doing it yourself, or laser level. A camera to take pictures because you think you're going to remember but then you don't. And then landscaping flags, I take landscaping flags with me because if I take a measurement, I set a flag and then so I can measure more accurately. I brought some with me. Like I said, graph paper landscaping templates. I use these for drawing maps more so. If I'm just gathering information, I don't take these with me, but these are a good tool to use when you're mapping. And then if you have access to a light table, that works well, or sliding glass door, large window for transferring your any maps onto. You can even have, as long as the lot lines are accurate, you can have maps blown up and then transfer them that way onto graph paper. And I usually go through several iterations of the design before I do the final design because things are going to move, they're not going to work out. One of the iterations of this design, I ended up somehow being off by 5 feet, the whole thing. So I had to and the placement of everything in such a small space is kind of integral, so it had to be accurate. So
5 feet, wow.
yeah.
So, when you use the graph paper, do you buy graph paper the size of the?
I do.
You don't put small sheets up there.
No, I have small sheets. That's what I do my practice, my first preliminary sketches on. Yeah, this paper is $3 a sheet. I get it at the Art Connection in Coos Bay, but if there's an art store here, I'm sure they carry it.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can get tracing paper too, helps. You can also, people use that for layering.
Tracing paper is good for layering. Yeah, when I did the design for Harvard Street Park and I did the water situation, I mapped the water situation I overlaid it. I used tracing paper for that because you can put it over your design. It's clear-ish, okay, or translucent maybe. And then you can transfer all the elements. And then you can do your water flow or your people flow or your car flow. Then you can just peel it back, when you're not using it. So anyway, those are good resources as well. So the rulers, I prefer to use the engineered ruler. That's how my graph paper is too. It's based on the inch, but it's divided into 10 instead of 12. So, which makes more sense, and that's how the paper is too. Each scale is divided further into inches. So on the 10 scale, for example, 1 equals 1 inch, or 1 inch equals 10 feet. And then on the 20 scale, 1 inch equals 20 feet, and so on and so forth. So the architect's ruler is normally used for interior mirror mapping, really down to like a more detailed scale here, but you can get pretty detailed with this as well. But you have 1/8 inch equals a foot, 1/4 inch equals a foot, and it's pretty nitpicky. That's how these rulers are actually designed.
Oh, they are?
Yeah, 1/4 inch equals 1 foot. Whoa. So when I use this, what I do is I just take my scale that I'm using. If I'm using the 20 scale on the engineer ruler, and I want, a 5 foot in diameter shrub or tree, I'll just measure which one of these is the right size, and that's the one I'll use. So yeah, and if this one is not as compatible with the graph paper that I use because it's not, because the graph paper is divided into 10. So okay, so mapping. This one was pretty easy. Like I said, each square is 5 feet, I believe. Yeah, each square is 5 feet. So it was, pretty easy to squeeze the whole design onto, first onto the smaller piece, and then I sized it up to this piece here. Something that is not rectangular and straightforward and doesn't have any existing structure is obviously going to be a little bit more complicated. So this diagram is from a book called Permaculture Design. And this is showing you how to kind of start mapping existing structures in a space. So this is an existing building. This is what's called a baseline. And you have the measurement for this. Then you can start taking measurements to different elements in the design. And if you have a Google Earth image that's to scale and you want to kind of wing it, you can draw a line on Google Earth from the center of a tree to the edge of a building and get a measurement. So you don't have to do this in the field. That's another way to do it. Something that she does also is she'll take bearings from the baseline to different elements, from the corner here to this tree, and then from that to that, and you're kind of triangulating like you would be if you were navigating with a map and compass, and then the bearing from here to here and the bearing from here to here.
Is there a template that you can use that gives you the approximate size of different plants and trees that you should? I guess this is the existing size.
Yeah.
But if you're laying it out, do you have something that you can, does something tell you that you should have so much space for a tomato plant or?
Well, it depends. It depends on a lot of things. So if you're doing fruit trees, for example, the rootstock will affect the final size of the tree. Your pruning will affect the final size of the tree. You can keep fruit trees smaller than they're intended to be. So you get to decide how much space you want to give this tree. If you're gonna do one straw revolution style and you're just gonna let all the trees be at their maximum capacity, then you should research the rootstock to see how big the tree is gonna get. It could be that you need to give it 12 feet, you know.
But it also depends on the age of your design, right? So you may plant a dense planting knowing that you're gonna thin this at 5 years and 10 years,
right,
and release the sun to the undergrowth and.
Yeah, so you can plan that in initially. You can plan for obsolescence essentially, because it's going to take years for your tree to get that big. So you can start growing things under it that they'll be succeeded eventually, right? Because you're the master of succession in your design, and you can decide, eventually these plants are not going to be living; they're short-lived perennials or whatever. But eventually, by the time they die out, the tree is going to be rather large, and we'll be shading them out anyway. But you can plan ahead by putting any permanent plants like shrubs. You would want to put them, not right at the base of the tree so that eventually they're shaded out. You would want to put them further out, like currants or gooseberries. They say gooseberry likes shade. I put my gooseberry in the shade and it wasn't happy, so. I don't know about that. Anyway, so when you're doing these measurements, you have to take into account the declination. Obviously, if you're going to map these bearings, right? So our declination is plus 14.5. Here she's minus 2.5 because she's in England. But anyway, that's just something to consider. This is kind of advanced mapping. You might not ever need to do this, but it's possible to do it.
So that's what you're talking about is if you're actually going to use a compass to lay out something.
Yeah, if you're going to go to the site.
Know what the declination.
Yeah, like I'm working on a site right now that has no structures, and I don't have the county map yet, but there's really nothing for me to go off of except for the corners, and so I might have to start citing to trees on the property that I know they want to keep, and so in that case, I might have to use these techniques.
Okay. You might use a protractor too. I guess you can use that and just go off the angle instead of the actual compass.
If you know,
and then you can transfer that to paper
to reference it to.
Well,
yeah,
a baseline.
Baseline could be the property line, could be an existing
road,
structure, could be a pin, like a mark.
Create an arbitrary line.
That's true too.
Yeah.
Just you put 2 stakes in the ground and that's your line.
Mm-hmm. And then you measure them from where they are in relation to the corners in the property line.
Oh.
Yeah. So it sounds complicated, but it's really not. This was really interesting too. This is what she does when she wants to map a structure that isn't, that's kind of an odd shape. She takes all these bearings like this and triangulates. I thought that was really cool. That is a lot of work. I know. It's a cool book.
Well, like you said, Google Earth, you just take a picture and then it has the tool that tells you the distances.
Right. I'm wondering if when this book came out, that wasn't, because Google Earth Pro was not wasn't free until a few years ago. So Google Earth Pro is free now. You can use Google Earth Pro to take a line across your property and get an elevation profile. It will estimate an elevation profile, tell you the highest point, the lowest point, and give you the contour line,
Like you.
a cross section.
Right.
Yeah.
cross-section.
So this is the map that we got initially for this property. I think, I'm not so sure about these lines here, but anyway, this is just to give you an idea of the areas that we would be looking at designing, or the backyard here. Not quite sure what this is
Yeah,
here.
that was the road.
Is that easement for the power company? This line here, this little,
I don't know if it's an interpretation of the hedge or,
oh, could be. It
uh,
looks pretty far forward though.
Could be.
And
though.
this looks like the actual property line
yeah.
going through right up against that driveway, and then it jogs this way.
Yeah.
And then over. So this part of the property is not on the map. And then Tim and Tiana want to change up this section in the middle here and make that sort of a, well, I'll let him tell you what they want to do there. And then they're also looking at developing some kind of hedge or buffer against the highway, a pollution and noise buffer here in the front. So Tim's going to talk a little bit more about what exactly, specifically what they want. And here is the Google Earth image that I pulled up. Like I said, you can subscribe to a program to be able to overlay the tax lot lines here. But this gives you a pretty clear picture of what's already there, what's happening with the site. You can also go on Google Earth and go back in time and see all the pictures that they've taken of
You
this
can.
property since they started taking pictures. Yep. I mean, sometimes it goes back into the 90s. And then there's a new feature where you can look over the course of a day. It'll show you the sun over the course of a day on this property. There'll be
I've
several.
not seen that feature. Do you
Yep.
have, is it,
It's Google Earth Pro, not just Google Earth.
wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of really, really interesting features. And that'll help you, figure out, it'll tell you the month of the year, but help you figure out kind of where the sun is going to be and when.
Well, yeah, because you can see the shadows.
Yep,
right? So you can tell
exactly.
This is gonna be in the shade
Yep.
in the winter.
And that was really helpful on the property I'm working on now, because they're just shaded all day long. I mean, you could see, there was light on the tops of the trees and all around, but not their property is just in the dark. So, and so this was the other map with the lines overlaid on the map of the Google Earth map. So you can see the lines here go this way, and then this is the other line, and this here, we kind of lost a little bit up there. That wasn't even on the map. So, but that's another way to play with. And if you're just sketching, you can print this out and it helps you to have the building there to be able to see, when I'm sketching this one out, there's nothing there for me to go on. It's just grass, so I don't need to have the building. But that's another way a helpful way to do it. So just a little bit about art. So you can use different techniques. I've been using colored pencil to make my designs, but I'm kind of branching out into markers. It's a little bit scary because a mark from a marker can't be undone, and the mark from the pencil can kind of be blended in or erased a little bit. But these are just different ways to give your design texture and depth. And these are 4 primary ways to shade. So you can blend from light to dark to light. You can do hatching, which is just lines. You can do cross hatching, which is lines both ways, or you can do stippling, which is just to make points.
Now, on this one, the one down there,
Mhm.
there's different colored trees. Are each the color represent a type of tree?
Ideally, yes, but I didn't plan specifically to put specific trees in each spot. I just wanted to show that that's going to be a fruit tree and shrub hedge.
Oh, okay.
But the only one that I did plant is in the northeast corner. There's gonna be a Desert King big, and that's a big tree. That was the only plant that I knew was gonna be in the design. Other than that, people are taking cuttings and propagating, and we're just gonna plant them as we get them. So,
One comment about that is that usually I try to mix trees up, so I don't have an apple by an apple, so that they can't
Right.
cross, pests can't cross it very
and you
easily.
see in the design, it's varied. I don't have a whole roll of red, a whole roll of blue, a whole roll of something
Right,
else.
that's what I think
Yeah.
that represents.
Exactly, diversity
Right.
in the
You,
planting.
you say you don't have an apple?
I don't have apple touching apple. I have an apple cherry apple, or something, some different species, so that the pest for the apple won't be able just to cross a limb that's touching another limb and go up there.
You disrupt the
It's
vector.
scary, it makes it a little bit harder for the pest to find the next tree.
Mhm.
But that helps, just that little
And
bit helps.
even if you are gonna plant two apples next to each other, even planting two apples on different rootstock might help, because some rootstocks are susceptible to certain pathogens and others aren't, and so if you use all the same rootstock and you happen to have some kind of pathogen on your property or on your site, could take all your apple trees out. So we have
How do you get
antidote.
different rootstock?
Well, you can order rootstock and graft your own apples.
Oh.
Or you can just order apples on different rootstock.
Oh, you can?
Yes,
It's really easy to
absolutely.
do too, it's surprisingly easy,
It is.
because nature wants to go so bad, you even can, as long as you get the Cambria matched up, it'll pretty much go.
Mm-hmm. We did that actually recently at an elder's house in our community. He wanted some apple trees grafted, and he had this sucker that was about this big, and he wanted the mother tree grafted onto it. So I had a scion that was this big, and I grafted it. I cut the sucker off and grafted that onto it. And you can do that. They don't have to match up in size. As long as the cambiums line up, it'll take usually. But that's a whole different class.
Yeah.
We'll do that one too, though. That's a
Yeah.
good one. Easy.
So,
It's surprise.
just a word about making things three-dimensional. When you're shading you want to make your trees look spherical. So you want to make sure that there's a highlight, a light tone, a mid-tone, a shadow here. Mid-tone's right around here, shadow. And then I usually put a cast shadow. I don't worry about the little reflection here, and that's just too much detail. But you want to also make sure that the light is coming from the same place for all of your plants. So you don't want the light source on the left side for one plant and the right side for another plant. You want to, because it's a permaculture design, it's a snapshot in time. You want to make sure that your sun is in the same location for all of your for your shadows and highlights. So these are just some close-ups of some ways that I use shadows to make things look three-dimensional and pop out. This, without shadow, if this is a play area in a map, would have looked completely flat and you wouldn't be able to tell what it is. But giving this hill a little bit of shadow and this slide and these little logs to climb on and this yurt type structure and, just giving everything some shadows really helps. And it could be as simple as using, I have a gray marker that I use to outline the back edge of all the trees, and that makes it just pop out of the paper. And then a little plug for community scale permaculture, because I think our communities really need this, and this is something that Tim is interested in doing, is creating urban edges. We talked about the edge effect before. This is an urban edge. So instead of having just a bare sidewalk, you've got something that's going to make people want to stop and look and pick flowers or, whatever. So you're creating an inviting, beautiful space for people to come into. I don't know if Andrew Millison coined this phrase, but he was the instructor for my PDC. And he said you want to create what's called a net in the flow. Oh, my battery. Looks like my banana system isn't working.
Did you talk about city repair?
Yes. Yeah, and I've actually been up there and
The
participated
banana
in that.
has to hold your charger in.
It was.
Was
Oh,
it?
look, it's good. Let's not touch it. Okay. So this is in Portland. They created a series of cob benches, and this is just out on the street. I love for Port Orford to okay something like this, but they are very, I don't know, maybe they will. I'm not gonna put any bad juju out there. Uh-oh. Come on, hang in there.
Very, what's the word?
I
you're
don't
looking
know,
for? Very old fashioned?
rigid? Yeah, rigid.
Okay.
But, you know, they did approve our community co-op design. This grant came from the city. It's on co-op property, but still, you know, I feel like that was a big win for everybody, for them and for us. So anyway, these are just inviting places for people walking by to stop and sit. You could put a little book library out, you know, you could have a little, you know, one of those little libraries right there, out there, and people walking by could exchange books. These are just ideas. This is City Repair. This is the Sunnyside neighborhood in Portland, and the whole community comes together and paints these beautiful mandalas in the intersection. And they have music and they have food, and it's really wonderful experience, and it brings the whole community together. And I wish we could do more of this kind of thing here. I think we're just kind of getting going.
They get the permission of all 4 corners of the 4 different properties.
Yeah.
And once they get an agreement on the 4 corners, then they go ahead and make the next step doing the design.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the law now in Portland, they can do that.
Yeah, kids are painting, families together. And then one last plug for the 6 R's. It used to be just the 3 R's. Remember in the 80s when it was like reuse, recycle. But now we have refuse, rethink, reduce, repair, and recycle.
What
So
does refuse mean?
don't buy it.
Reduce the consumption.
Yeah, don't buy it.
Don't do it.
Stuff.
We tend to go for the convenience. So sometimes you have to back off of the convenience.
Yeah.
And not, because it's a throwaway. You know,
Mhm.
once you use it, it's thrown away.
Yeah. So just say no to stuff. I think that might be
Huh.
it.
Or if you use the water bottle, you know,
Yeah.
the plastic water
That's it.
bottle, bring your own cup and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay, so that's pretty much all I've got.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. We can start, well,
So
Tim,
next-
maybe Tim can talk a little bit about what exactly they want. And I could bring that map up maybe. Let me go back to that. Yeah.
Do that a little bit, and then we're gonna go over the questionnaire.
There we go. Maybe that one, I think it might be a good one to
Yes, you don't
look
have
at.
to hit everything on the questionnaire, but hit the points that are main to you.
Yeah, so what we have here is a hotel on a highway, right? We have 2 kids, and we would like to raise them a little more natural, outdoorsy, you know, and there's a lot of opportunity. There's the beach here, there's the forest here, there's, you know, redwoods, the river, everything is there, but you know, there is some aspect of you spend time in your own backyard, and right now what we have is a lawn. We're not true believers of lawn. We are food, not lawns people. So what you see there is a lot of opportunity, a lot of open space, and you know, there's some things we want to incorporate. We want to incorporate at least some sort of either shop or storage or even playhouse or some building type that maybe encompasses a lot of that stuff, or becomes a place to run from the rain, playing in the background, in the backyard. We would like to have a place where we could have an outdoor fire, enjoy that.
That's for your customers as well as you, or just you?
It's mostly us. There is some long-term vision to incorporate a continental breakfast, and then at that point, it's where do you sit and enjoy your continental breakfast? And that little blob here
This one here.
is maybe a good spot for that. Right now, it's a giant thing full of rocks and a couple of azaleas and a couple of evergreens.
It's the wood rotting.
And then there's the little deck thing, and then the wood is rotting. And so that whole thing could be completely revamped. And when you do that, you could incorporate some sort of noise cancellation in terms of, you know, building up a little bit of structure so that the noise of the road comes up and over it. And you can incorporate a cob wall. You can incorporate a water feature that's going to generate some white noise that's going to counteract the street. So there's some of that going on. But you know, possibly a nice place to eat would be a little garden in the back there. Access to that is not great right now. It's only through our laundry room or through the side gates.
So
That's a consideration.
do you envision guests eventually being able to access the back part of the property?
It's a potential. I mean, each one of those rooms is going to get remodeled. I mean, this is an old facility, right?
Maybe have a back door?
And some of them might have back doors into their little private, sitting area or something. And that space that is right up against the wall there is only pseudo usable anyway. Right now, what it does is it takes all the water off the impervious surface and it tries to channel it to the street. Realistically, a lot of it absorbs in and it's not graded properly anymore. But to create a paved in section there, you're not going to lose a lot of planting area,
Right.
because it's almost it's almost 0% sunshine.
Yeah.
It's almost always in the shade.
Right.
And because that backyard is fully north, you've got a sun line that moves with the seasons. And so
Do you know whereabouts the sun stops in the winter? How far into the yard the shade?
You know what? I meant to mark that stuff, but I didn't. I know it's easy enough to gather with the sun dome, but I don't have one of those. We meant to stake it on the thing. We'll go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
We did plant a small row of bulbs. We kind of
I remember
took
that.
notice of where and when they bloom. So you kind of right now being just the start of spring, we've watched that line come way in already and make it's almost even with that little jut out there on the right hand side. Now this hedge here is great and we love the concept of the hedge. There's not a lot of usefulness in that hedge right now. I mean, there's a couple of trees you would probably save.
And you can
There
dig
it is.
back into the hedge,
We can do some replacement.
keep your privacy, replace, but also keep a little privacy screen there.
And we do gather, all summer long, we gathered blackberries out of that hedge and we ate them, and we really enjoyed. That was a family activity we could do almost daily because there was berries
So
being, just being full sun. It was very, very, very productive. Like I said, there's some garbage in there. They're right at the corner of that little jog. Basically, sort of if you do a 45-degree angle there's a pine tree that is, it's a low coastal windswept pine. It's got many branches. It's
Short
low,
pine.
but we would like to, clean the junk out of that. And
Yeah, I remember that one.
Sculpt that into and let it
I saw movies.
exhibit its own beingness of treeness, of pineness, and keep that, but behind in there's a bunch of, probably native stuff. And, but it's also was a dumping ground, and there's just a lot of garbage in there that needs to be all cleaned out. And then as far as everything else, we need to maintain some egress. We have a power pole back there. There's also a 500-gallon propane tank to run the laundry. So we need to be able to get trucks back there. Now the gas is serviced behind the left-hand building, the left-hand wing of the unit there. There's a gate that comes back. He pulls in there and he hooks up his hose, and that's great. There's actually some asphalt that's sort of covered by dirt, and it's pretty old, but it's a very solid tap in. And I'm not sure. I have to talk to the power company to understand whether they can use that same egress. Right now, we're sort of keeping the design open because we've historically had some egress from the poncho side of the park.
So that's here.
Yeah, and that's
The
where
power, they're not sure whether the power company needs an easement to get in here, or whether they can
just
come
use
that
the
way.
line instead of having two.
Yeah.
exactly.
And do you know if this is, if that is city easement, or do we know yet?
I don't know yet. I believe. So it's very, very strange. Right up to the border there at Ponchos, you've got sort of city sidewalk. And the whole thing falls apart until you get to the other side of O'Halloran's. And actually, O'Halloran's used to be part of the hotel back when this was a holiday motel. It was the breakfast place associated with that, and over time, all this stuff got so rough and split off, etc. But in the olden days when this place was built in like the 50s, that was part of the hotel concept, holiday hotel concept, including hotel and
Cool.
travelers. So there's a lot going on. There's the little centerpiece there. You can see another pine tree. The way that the property line runs, most of that belongs on the Holleran side. So there's not much we can do here. But again, we would love to draw some more interest to the property by, what we have is some scrub, juniper. There's a large pine tree, which we love the tree. It completely obscures our sign as people enter this town. But we love the tree. We had the opportunity to get it removed for free, and we were going to go for it. We balked. We said, no, can't just replace that. We hadn't been here long enough, and we just don't feel we had observed enough.
Yeah, good call.
Make a
Good
giant
call.
permanent change like that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, but you could, I mean, if you could replace it with something stunning, like mimosa tree or something,
Maybe just get trimmed out and turned into like a life size, bonsai-esque.
Good stuff. Yeah.
Hey, Lola, what you doing?
She's showing the
All right.
camera her book.
Okay, that's gonna be
Part of the video. We'll edit that out.
Right. So then there's also this retaining wall here, the retaining wall. That is a giant, southern splitter almost. It's a little more of the afternoon sun because of the angle there. And there is an apple tree in there we would like to preserve. But, hasn't been pruned in years and years.
Where's the apple tree?
It's actually pretty close to the bottom of that little section. We don't have a laser.
Well, one thing we're gonna do too is walk around.
Yeah.
So let's maybe pull that one and back. That's the next stage, really.
Yeah, and then there's nothing else really in there sacred. We actually have started a couple of small fields, the apple tree and the malus crab apple tree. It's not fully planted, but we purchased some rosemary and some lavender. We're trying to deter the deer, but both those trees got whacked pretty hard last year. We planted some comfrey in there for chop and drop and for mulching purposes. But that's all we do.
Right.
But again, getting back to what we really want, we need some kind of building back there potentially. We'd like a little fire pit space out. Family, we'd like to have some perennial production if we can. And then we're also where we've been most successful as gardeners has been the intensive method of raised beds. So we wouldn't mind having some raised beds. In terms of permaculture placement, it's not ideal. The kitchen is basically right there where that van is. If you just right there up into the building, that's where the kitchen is. So to put a chop or a cutting garden for food up that there, you've got to go all the way through the hotel, through the laundry room, back into the thing and cut your vegetables.
So the flow, I'm getting the flow
is wrong there. I mean, you could potentially put it here into this little.
Well, if there was a breezeway or something, but you really have no.
Really have a breezeway. I mean,
You'd have to take out a whole room to put that in.
And we've thought about that. There is a room that we're thinking that we could actually turn into the breakfast room. And then you have the option.
Doors on either side.
Or even do like doors, like sliders, so you can like tell the open
Right.
and
French doors.
So, but at that point, we're talking actually architecture, and we're talking
That's a big
permitting
change.
and structural change.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. So,
And you need to sit there for a year at least before you.
even more. Yeah. So, and it's financially makes sense.
Right. You know, I would make money from that. Of course, if you can start serving food, that's money.
Yeah. If we've got to ROI a lot of these decisions, but it's not hard to ROI some landscaping, in terms of
Small and slow.
and create a space for the family. That's pretty important. That's the
But,
only reason why we're here.
the long-term vision is important, but you don't have to make those big changes right now. Just start putting some plants in the ground.
And then just generally speaking, we want to be demonstration of urban permaculture, we feel it's an important, principle, and it's important to society, especially now more than ever. And it's the way things should be done.
Yeah.
And instead, we're doing what is considered conventional
Right.
agriculture, which
How
is
did that
nothing
become
conventional about it.
conventional?
When you
I mean, why is the burden of proof on the organic growers?
because
Why isn't it the opposite?
Right, why they have to call it organic
Yeah,
vegetables?
right, why can't they just call it vegetables?
Call them poison vegetables.
Yeah, chemical vegetables
Toxic
or whatever.
pesticide vegetables.
Yeah, let the burden of proof be on the, the growers using chemicals.
It's a pity it switched around like that.
So are raised beds part of some permaculture?
Sure.
Yeah.
If you have a wet area, that's one of the only ways to do it,
Or if
it's real
you're
wet.
growing on asphalt, if you have to build
Or
up,
if you're in with handicap track,
yeah.
You want to see green.
Anything that really works for you could be part of the system.
we're not
How
like
about water fountains?
Perfect. Yeah, water features are really important. You gotta have water.
they attract birds,
But
they
that
attract
means, how are you
pollinators,
gonna,
they attract.
that means you're gonna power it with an electric motor
Or solar power.
or solar power?
Yeah, we did our solar power actually once. We tried to, and ended up, we did end up putting power, the guy wanted more load. Because there's trade-offs.
Do
So
you
if you wanna
envision
blow it
a water feature in the community garden area? 5 acres.
I
Lots of-
don't know, it's something that intrigues me. I know we have a little fountain at home with a little solar cell.
Right.
That's obviously miniature, but, yeah, that intrigues
bigger
me. I
barrels,
like
bigger
water, I like the
Yeah.
flow of
Like to
water.
hear it.
To hear it, see it, yeah.
It's good for the bees and the birds.
And it actually cools the air, so in the
Mhm.
summertime, if you create a mist that's cooler. In fact, trees are also cooler air conditioners, really, so trees also produce cooling in winter, they produce more. It's kind of interesting, how trees do that. We don't really realize that the trees and the plants make weather.
We have a lot of rain here during the rainy
Oh,
season. I'm told about 70 inches. What do we do with that water?
Well, you wanna store some of it, store 40,000 gallons, or so.
You can, you'll probably need a garden shed, start catching off the surfaces.
Right.
Yeah. And
For
so
every 1,000 feet, you get 600 gallons with 1 inch of rain.
Mm-hmm.
that entire,
For every what?
1,000 square feet of your house, you get 623 gallons
For
with 1
every
inch of
inch,
rain.
right, 1 inch.
And we get 70, so multiply that times
Give me
70.
that number again. For every,
1,000
1
square
inch,
feet.
for 1,000 square feet, 1 inch of rain equals 623. And actually 15% less than that because they consider bounce off, but
620
23 less
Yeah.
15% for bounce off.
gallons.
Yeah.
likely you want to allow for some.
Some people say as
Wash
much
off
low
the
as
dirt.
500 gallons is
Yeah.
what you actually get.
So what do I do with
flush.
that? Where do I put that?
Well, you can, every house has some square footage on it. So if you catch the rain off of it, that's legal to do. You catch
Well,
rain
it's legal,
off
but what do I do with it?
You gotta
Then
store
you
it.
gravity feed it to
To
the
a
plants.
cistern or to wherever you wanna put it to.
If you do an above ground cistern, then you can use the natural water pressure of the cistern to feed your hose.
Yeah.
If you do it in the ground, you might have to pump it back out.
For every
Just-
foot of, you get a half a PSI basically of tidal water. So if you have 10 feet of water, you got 5 PSI, which is enough to do it.
Okay, so I'm not familiar with above ground cistern, so I'll look that up. That sounds intriguing to me. But a below ground, tank, so are those legal?
You can,
Well, it's the same pressure, because it's still out of water, is the head of water is where you get the gravity from. It's just, 25 PSI, so, it's not gonna go flow higher than what the water level is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
you can vary a septic tank and, plug the holes obviously so that leaks, but that can be the system or,
He quacks like
leave
he's
ground
quack
black and they have out there
some
doing
other
solar.
door.
In the summertime, you can pump up with solar.
Okay, well, if it's above ground, you don't have to.
Ideally
Two,
for,
a
a
two,
community garden
And a 4.
of that size,
You
anyway,
see?
or any
And
situation, you wanna
this
have the
button on
tank
the bottom.
be at the highest spot on the property.
Watch.
And then the gravity feeds down. You wouldn't have to worry about pumping, you know what I mean? So if you were gonna build a structure with an impermeable surface, like a roof, a shed with a roof, for example, or, you know, a cob bench with a roof, you could have those structures still feeding water into the tank at the highest part of the property, and then it would trickle down to the plant.
Yeah, you can bury pipe, you can, because you also want to irrigate under mulch. You don't really want to irrigate above the ground. You're gonna do it below the mulch, because it doesn't evaporate, it's more effective, you use less water. So it spreads the water go further in the winter and summer stuff. And there's a lot of techniques for that. Okay, so we want to take a little short walk around to get a more physical idea of it, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about the questionnaire.
We can make some notes on.
Oh, yeah, take the maps and clipboard maybe.
Yeah. Clipboards.
Oops.
Do you want to turn that off, Gene?
Yes.
I wonder what that looks